Hi. Today we're looking at a map that I've come up with, and a potential scenario, or not really potential, but a scenario, and what I think would happen. That is, if there was or if all the states in the U.S. went into a battle royale, and the rules on this is only the civilians fighting, no military stuff, and there's like no government really. It's just like whatever the civilians have is basically what they're going to be able to use. And there's no outside influence from other countries or anything. And if we take a look at the rankings here, we have the dead states. This is just my predictions on states that are just going to get immediately destroyed. There's the states that'll last a little bit, yeah. And there's the average states, so they'll hold out for a while. And there's the good states that really are, high level and good. And then there's the best states, the states that have a chance at winning. So the first thing we're gonna go, oops, we're gonna go through here is just like kind of the opening days. This is assuming we're starting in, we'll say March. Is Virginia is going to push straight in through DC, in through, um, in through Maryland, and Pennsylvania might take a little bit, of Maryland, and might take a little bit into Delaware as well. Ultimately, they're going to be defeated, or they're ultimately Virginia's going to take most of that area. In addition, the next things that are going to happen is New York is just going to run straight through into Vermont, immediately into Massachusetts, into Connecticut, pushing along the coast most likely, taking all these islands. Maine might start pushing a little bit. We'll do that in a second. So New York has made major gains here already, and is also at the same time pushing into New Jersey. New Jersey's going to hold up a little bit better, but not by much. And so that's kind of the first big stuff, or some of the big stuff in the opening bits. The next stuff is California's. And California, for their population, isn't that powerful, but I think their population would be such an advantage that they would be able to do stuff. They're going to start pushing up into Oregon, into bits of Arizona, into bits of Nevada. Probably just going straight for Vegas, because that's really the only good population center to take in Nevada. And Texas is going to start pushing into Oklahoma, as they've got a lot of food there that they can use. And I know we said we weren't doing like government stuff, but that's still part of it. They're going to take the Panhandle back, which will be big. And Texas, in my opinion, is the most powerful state on here. They've got all their civilians have ridiculous amounts of guns, and they've got a huge population. So they're pushing deep into this. They'll probably also push into Louisiana a little bit. This will be a much harder fight because Louisiana's a much more difficult state to take and got well-armed civilians, but they will start pushing into it. Next, Florida is going to start pushing through into Alabama. This will be another big part and this will again be hard, but Florida is also one of the big states here. North Carolina and Georgia are going to start pushing through into South Carolina, and I think we need a different. We need a way to represent. Cool. The big states are taking most of the land, so we'll use this like green color for states that aren't like the real good states. Represent, and they'll be able to push into South Carolina, taking a decent chunk of it, although they can't put as much into it because they have to worry about Virginia up north, as Virginia is one of those top states. So that's big. So that's our first state that's fallen completely, is South Carolina. Or no, besides the northern states. And speaking of them, they've basically completely collapsed at this point. They're being pushed back. Massachusetts is taken. New Jersey, Vermont's taken a little more of New Hampshire. And so most of those New England states, Pennsylvania is pushing into New Jersey, along with New York. They're both taking territory on it, and that'll be the next state that's fallen is New Jersey, and that'll be most of the of New England now controlled by just three states. Okay, so what's gonna happen next here? Let's see. Let's go into the Midwest. Washington and Idaho are gonna go to war. This will be interesting. I think Idaho would be able to take these regions because they're pretty similar to Idaho, basically, so they would know how to fight in them. They'd start taking. However, at the same time, Montana is gonna start pushing into Idaho, which that'll be a hard fight, but they will be able to make progress in it. Why is this just like not? That's whatever. So Montana, so they're both making gains there. It won't be huge, but there will be some progress there. Illinois is going to start pushing into several states at once. They're going to push into Iowa. Is that Iowa? Yes. They're going to make progress there. They're going to start pushing into Indiana as well because they want to capture more farmland. Missouri and Kansas are going to start fighting, but Texas is also pushing into Kansas, so Kansas is going to be weakened, and Missouri is going to be able to take some land here, which will be big for them, along with Arkansas. Also, and Arkansas is also going to start pushing into Oklahoma, along with Texas, and we'll have to put those at a different color. So it's quite confusing to put all of these in their correct place, or get these all correct. We'll keep them coded, color coded. Alright, so they're pushing in. Both of them are. Arkansas's then going to be able to start fighting Kansas, and under this pressure, Kansas is going to really struggle to take much territory. And what do we do here? Or Kansas is going to really struggle to fight off all three of Texas, Missouri, and Arkansas. And how are we gonna? Hold up. I'm gonna have to change this to a darker green to suit to make it make more sense here in this situation. These tend to be a little confusing. So that's Missouri's taken or conquered territory. That's Arkansas. Okay, that makes more sense now. So Texas is going to keep pushing up into Kansas, running straight through there. Also taking some sections of New Mexico as well, although New Mexico is really just not worth it, from what I know. California at this point has pushed all the way up to Vegas, and I think that after Vegas is taken, Nevada is going to almost collapse immediately. So I'm going to fill this in now. So that's their only real population center. And I reckon I probably should put Arizona higher up, because they've got Phoenix, or higher up on the rankings, but I didn't, so I'm just going to have to deal with it. So Nevada is pretty much collapsed and taken by California. This will be big, because this is like by far the biggest state that's collapsed. Oklahoma has fallen at this point as well, but besides that. So now moving on back to the East Coast, Florida has pretty much completely taken over Alabama now. Sorry, this is very confusing with all these states. It's not working properly, but shoot. Hold on. Okay, so this is mostly just taken all by Florida. I think Georgia did a little bit, but this is mostly work from Florida, because I'm going to show in a second what Georgia's been working on. So Georgia up here, and we're going to switch this over to the lighter blue again. They're pushing up into North Carolina's captured territory and starting to push up into North Carolina itself. Okay, whatever. And they haven't made too much progress. However, at the same time, what did I just do? Okay. Or at the same time, Virginia is also pushing in. There's a lot of watermen, so they're also going to be able to have control of the seas. Virginia is, so they're both pushing into North Carolina heavily. Virginia is invading West Virginia, as they're, that makes sense, because it just makes sense. Next big thing is New York is going to start pushing in through Pennsylvania. Alright, we need to get a new color for this. New York is pushing into Pennsylvania, and this is New York. It should be able to take Pennsylvania pretty quick. They'll put up a fight, and Ohio is also joining in on this. They're gonna start pushing into Pennsylvania and helping New York invade it. New York is also pushing through through Maine, that into New Hampshire, that's been captured by Maine, and start pushing into Maine itself. And they'll be able to make fairly quick work, although I think the northern parts would hold out for a while because of how cold it is. Alright, let's go back. Ohio is pushing farther and farther is pushing into Indiana as well, and they're going to be able to take this pretty quickly. This won't be too much of a fight. Along with Illinois also pushing in. So Indiana is going to fall to Ohio, and Illinois, they're probably going to split this here. Let's get this all split up. So that's the new, so Indiana is now fallen. Let's see. Alright, so let's see what else. Georgia is, we need a darker color here. Georgia is continuing to push farther up into North Carolina with the help of Virginia, although Virginia's a little busy, so they won't right now with invading West Virginia and all that. So they're going to be able to make good progress in North Carolina, but not as much as they normally would. Sorry, this thing's being all weird. Alright. And Florida, in the meantime, has started its invasion of Mississippi, and they're going to be able to push. They're going to take the coastal areas. They're going to be able to push a little bit. Mississippi could hold up for a while, so they're not going to take everything at this point. And at the same time, they're also starting an invasion into southern Tennessee, which would be big. And let's switch back over to the west coast. California, let's get rid of that. I'll push that back. California is continuing to push up into Oregon, and they've pretty much taken it all now, which will be big. They'll still have some holdouts, but not significant enough. Won't be enough to really change the tide. And during this, California is also invading Idaho, because they feel like it basically, and now they can concentrate their forces in one area. And because of this, Montana is going to start making advances into Idaho as well. And Idaho is going to be kind of crushed here, as they're having to fight off two nations or fighting a war on two fronts, which doesn't go well ever, basically. So they're continuing to push farther in, and this will probably be, I reckon there's probably be a little different than this. So this is so California has really made a lot of gains here. Probably more than any other nation at this point. Pushing farther up into Oregon. Probably pushed into Arizona some more as well here. Arizona, think I underrated them majorly, but they can't match California. And in this case, Texas has also they've pushed farther into Louisiana. They're making major gains here again, pushing down to New Orleans. And the southern parts, they're probably going to focus on those. And pushing into Arkansas. Arkansas will put up a fight because they're powerful, but not the level. Texas is also pushing into New Mexico, taking good chunks of it, taking more and more of Kansas. Missouri has taken a little bit more here. We'll see. Ah, shoot. That is not what I meant to do. Yeah. What the? Alright. Yep, Missouri is pushing farther in through here. They're pushing into Kansas. Texas is taking more of Kansas as well. And ultimately, Kansas just can't take this kind of pressure with where Arkansas was fighting them, Texas was fighting them, and Missouri. And Kansas is powerful, but it's not powerful enough to fight off the number one ranked state in this situation. So they're going to fall as well. Texas has continued to push farther into New Mexico and made advances into Arkansas, but not significant enough. Probably pushed into Missouri as well. It's hard to say. Alright, so now we've got a few big nations here. We've got, it seems that the dark blue nations are taking a lot of territory. New York is finally taken most of Pennsylvania here. Virginia is also taking chunks of Pennsylvania, but not as much, along with Ohio is also taking bits of it. They've finally taken Maine as well. So New York has really secured this whole coast area, or this whole northern, like all of New England at this point is controlled by New York. We'll go ahead and color this in the new color of New York. Alright. Okay, so now Virginia is has pushed up through into Pennsylvania as well. That'll be Ohio's territory here, I think. So Ohio is pushing in probably into West Virginia as well, now that I think of it. Virginia has taken West Virginia, so West Virginia's fallen. Virginia's going to push into Pennsylvania as well, so they're going to kind of split it with New York, I guess. So that'll be big. That's the first, or one of the first green states to fall. And then this will probably be the biggest. And Virginia has been able to push into North Carolina, taking it almost completely. And then this will be the big invasion here. Is Florida is going to start trying to invade Georgia. So Georgia, and at the same time, they're also going to Georgia's going to start being invaded by Virginia. So Florida is going to start pushing in to Georgia here. They're going to make some gains in the south. Although, you got to remember, Georgia is one of the big, most powerful states here. And with this, Virginia is also going to start pushing back, or trying to take the chunks of North Carolina that were taken by Georgia. So they're starting to invade into these areas. So this map is getting very messy, but we're just going to have to deal with it, I guess. And even into South Carolina. So that'll be big for Virginia. That looks all weird. Jeez. That is the problem with this map software that I use, or not really map. This isn't the map part, but it does get kind of weird sometimes. So I think Georgia is starting to. That's the wrong color. We don't want that. So Georgia is starting to lose more and more territory here to combine the combination of Florida and Virginia. So they're pushing. Florida is pushing towards Atlanta. Virginia is pushing down through South Carolina quickly, and since Georgia really can't spare anybody to defend South Carolina, since they're fighting off Florida, who's on the doorstep of Atlanta, Virginia's going to start pushing in, which will be, and they're going to make it all the way to the border with Georgia. And during this, what else is going on? Let's pop back to the west coast and other areas. Texas has taken New Mexico completely. They weren't going to hold out forever. Texas really only took so long to take it because there's not much there to take. So let's get this all filled in. Okay, that's the big thing. California is pushing in as well. They've made gains up here. We're into Arizona. And so is Texas. They're pushing in. They're going to try to get to the coast. And so ultimately, I think Arizona will be able to hold out here a little longer. But this will be probably the first. I think California and Texas on a collision course here with Arizona. Speaking of California, they've taken Oregon now completely, and they've pushed back Washington almost completely, taking them out. Washington's probably holding on up in the northwest a little bit, but not substantially. Give them that much maybe left. And California is taking territory that Montana took from Idaho back, or they're taking it for themselves basically. And so they're really expanding. They've taken the entire west coast now pretty much. Wow, the west coast looks so much better compared to the east coast. It's just a mess. But anyways, with this, Florida is going to be able to take Georgia, and this will be huge because this is the first top state to fall completely. They've taken Atlanta. This will put Florida in a really good position. So Florida and Virginia are now bordering each other. And let's see what else is. Texas was able to finally take. Texas has been able to push through Louisiana completely and take it, which will be a big result here, as Texas is just so powerful in this situation, and they're able to fight in that conditions. They're pushing into Arkansas. They've started fighting Missouri up north, taking territory in Kansas that was originally occupied by Missouri. Alright. They're starting to push into Missouri here. What else? Let's go back up north. New York is pushing even farther. Has started pushing into Ohio's captured territory, like territory that Ohio has captured. I'm gonna switch this up here. Let's get this back in its color it should be. New York's captured territory. The colors, I don't have that many colors to show captured territories, so it can be a little tricky. They're starting to push farther in. Virginia is pushing into West Virginia, or like the territory that Ohio took from West Virginia, and they're able to take it pretty easy because Ohio is dealing with New York up north. And let's see what else. Oh yeah. I think at this point, I'd forgot. Illinois is starting to push. What the heck? That's not what I want. Illinois is pushing in through the territory that Ohio had taken from Indiana, and they were able to take it successfully, as Ohio was just so busy fighting off Virginia and New York. And they're going to start pushing into western parts of Ohio as well, along with Missouri, as Missouri's busy fighting off Texas. So they're able to make gains there. Tennessee is also starting to push in, along with Tennessee. Yeah, Tennessee is starting to push into Missouri a little bit. Let's see what else is going on. Yeah, Texas has pretty much taken Arkansas now. Arkansas put up a fight, but they're not gonna stop Texas in this situation ever, basically. And what else is gonna happen here? Yeah, Texas is invading Missouri. They're taking good chunks of it immediately. They might take a little bit of Mississippi, but not a ton. I think most of that would probably end up just going to Georgia. I mean, not Georgia, Florida. And now Texas is in an interesting position because for one thing, they're dominating. They've taken massive amounts of territory, but they're also stuck in between Florida and California. So they're in a little bit of a predicament on what to do next. In the meantime, California is pushing even farther in the west coast. They've taken all of Washington now. It was tough because it was just cold up there, but ultimately they managed to pull it off. They're pushing into Montana, and they were able to do this with relative ease. Yeah, what the heck? I'm gonna start pushing farther in. Again, it's cold, but ultimately that'll slow. The cold will slow progress, but ultimately it won't halt it too. It won't be able to be enough to fend off California. They'll push into Wyoming, push into Utah, taking chunks of all of those places. Texas is going to start pushing into Colorado because they've got this kind of corner in a good situation to take. Going to start pushing into Nebraska, which start taking more of Missouri. And Illinois has taken chunks of that, but not enough to really make a difference, I don't think. So Texas takes most of that. And in this situation, it's tricky with the colors here, how to show it properly, but I'll try my best here. So now the big question is this East Coast section, because it's got a lot of powerful nations on it, and they're all colliding at this point. And what I think is going to happen here is Virginia is going to get kind of sandwiched. New York is going to start pushing in from the north. Or actually, I don't know. New York might not want to pick on Virginia. They might just go for the, northwest state or northeast states like Ohio. But I do think that Florida is going to start pushing through into South Carolina. That's controlled by Virginia at this point. They're going to be able to make progress on it. Yeah, they're going to take most of that, and these borders are such a mess at this point because so many people have taken them. They're going to start pushing into North Carolina, and they're also going to start pushing into Tennessee. And Tennessee is very mountainous, so they will be difficult to take, but ultimately it's not going to be enough to resist Florida. North Carolina is starting to be taken at a slow rate, granted, but because Virginia is powerful. And let's see what's happening here. I kind of just don't want to fill in the Arizona part because it's going to make everything quite complicated for me, but I guess I have to. So, is there a way to? Yeah, we'll show Texas's new holdings when they're like bordering California in this light blue color. It's a little complicated because I was using the same color for them, but we're gonna push into Arizona here. And I don't think these two superpowers are gonna want to go at each other immediately. I think they're gonna probably just kind of hang out on each other's borders for a little bit. California's gonna push further into northern Utah. Texas will push into these same kind of general area in the Midwest. Utah isn't the Midwest, but they're gonna push up into Utah, pushing in the southern parts. Same with California is just gonna be. Again, just California's sheer numbers are gonna be enough to take Utah here, I think, and most of these other nations. Alright, so Utah has fallen. Texas has taken some of it. We'll give here. I'm not sure what to do for percentage that each state takes, but I'll give Texas kind of the benefit of the doubt on the southern part. I think I've been kind of underplaying them a little bit here. And yeah, they're going to be able to continue to push in through Colorado. Colorado's fighting hard, but it's not going to be enough to resist Texas in this situation. Let's see. Yeah, California will take some northern chunks of Colorado with it. Push farther into Wyoming, although it just doesn't really care that much about Wyoming because there's just nobody really there, so they're not going to take all of it yet. And coming back to the East Coast. Let's see. New York is pushing into Ohio here. They're taking territory quite quickly because Ohio's just got too much to deal with Illinois on one side, Virginia on one side, although Virginia is occupied as well, and New York up in the north, so they're gonna fall. And then they're gonna start invading Kentucky in the north. They'll be able to make good advances here quite quickly, because they're really not that occupied still, so they can kind of take them one at a time. Florida has finally taken all of Tennessee here, and they're going to start pushing up into Kentucky, although they are pretty busy fighting Virginia. Speaking of which, they've started to push farther up into North Carolina. They're taking heavy losses every step of the way here, and they're pushing up more into the north or the coast of North Carolina. And so Virginia has lost almost all its southern territory at this point, but they've still got their home states in some of the northern parts that they conquered. Oops, we don't want to do that yet. Next thing is New York as Hattery. It's so difficult to find a color for everything. This will be New York's color when it's bordering Florida. This like bright greenish blue thing. I'm not sure that it's very tricky here. So at this point, Virginia is in quite a situation because they're basically they're completely trapped by New York, and Florida is pushing farther up. They've taken all of North Carolina at this point. Starting to push into southern bits of Virginia. Going to be able to come up the coast. Although they're going to struggle a lot to take some of these southern portions, as they're very mountainous. But they will make progress here. And so they're really struggling a lot, or they're really going to struggle a lot here. And now Texas really has a predicament because on one hand they could start trying to fight Florida since it's growing, but on the other hand they would have to worry about fighting off California. But they are so. But I think their play here is probably just do neither and keep pushing in through these Midwestern states, really trying to take all of them. Oops. These colors switched to. Let's just get back a couple here. Alright, yeah. They've taken all of Missouri now. They're pushing up into Nebraska. They're gonna start fighting Illinois. They're gonna make gains, although Illinois is a very powerful country, so they won't be able to make too much. They won't be able to do too much. It's Illinois as Chicago, and those Chicago civilians are crazy. So they're gonna be. They will make gains into all these areas. California now has basically pushed straight through Montana and straight through Wyoming. I'm going to go ahead and fill these in. Realistically, Montana's cold and their civilians are tough, I imagine, but they're not a match for California. And they're kind of alone, and California really doesn't have too much fighting going on at this point. They're not really fighting Texas much, so they're going to fall to California quite quickly. If I can actually fill it in properly. And it's going to be the same story for Wyoming, unfortunately. As much as I hate California, they do have a large population. Texas is going to get in on the action over here. They're going to start trying to push in to Wyoming as well. And they'll take some stuff, but they are kind of busy just taking all these north or the Midwest states. They've taken Nebraska now, and this will be. So now Texas is really they're like kind of the divider between the east and the west coast major states. Let's move back to the east coast. Unfortunately, for Virginia, Florida has finally pushed through the Rocky Mountains and southwestern Virginia and all those places, and they've taken Richmond, and that's going to be pretty much the end of that'll be the end of Virginia. Pretty much, they've got these territories up north, although New York is going to start pushing into them. Same with and Florida is going to do the same. I'm going to start pushing. They're probably going to be able to take a little more because of how they're situated, and here we're going to have to switch this up. This white kind of, or this like bright green color represents New York when it's near when it's near Florida. Okay, so now our only like large states, like states that were predicted to go far, that are still remaining are Florida, Texas, New York, and California. The major states, or like the really top states that have fallen, are Georgia and Virginia. Those were the first two to go. Although they've only just fallen. And wait a minute. Okay. And now, for the most part, the majority of the country is controlled by these couple states. The majority of the country, I think, is controlled by just California and Texas overall. But with that being said, these states aren't as populous, so they aren't as populated, so they won't. So that won't. That's not as important, but it still will be. Texas is pushing in. They're finally taking Chicago. They finally managed to take Chicago here. So they're gonna keep pushing through Illinois, and they've taken it. Now, that'll be a major. That'll be major for Texas. So they've taken all these areas now. Ah, shoot. Alright. Sorry about this. Indiana is part of Texas now. Something I never thought I would say, but we're just gonna have to leave Indiana. It is a mess. My goodness. California is gonna keep pushing in. They're gonna take out the rest of Wyoming. I meant to do that earlier, but I forgot about it. So they've been able to completely push through Wyoming. Both countries are pushing up into these last kind of northern states before kind of the final battles. And realistically, both states are just going to run immediately through them. There's not really a whole lot these states can do. So here we go. That'll be California is going to take North Dakota entirely. Not sure how to really split this, but we'll do our best. Okay. California's continuing to push into South Dakota as well. Texas will take a little more. This color represents Texas when it's bordering California. I think I've said it already. So there's that. New York is gonna push into Michigan, and Michigan is very cold and is very defendable terrain, but Michigan's entirely alone against what the country or the state that now controls the entire northern parts of the East Coast. Yeah, we'll say they take this northern part. I don't know if they actually would, but we'll say they do. With that, they're going to start using that northern part to invade northern Wisconsin. Along with Texas is going to do the same. They're not using the northern part, but they're also going to invade Wisconsin, along with southern Minnesota. So they've pushed in through all of that. California's going to push in as well. They'll take these northern regions more. So now, let's get these kind of border color for Texas. So wow, Texas has pushed to Canada at this point. So now we've just got we've got the big four states in this situation. We've got California, or Alaska and Hawaii, but they're not really going to do much since they're not in the continental U.S. So now we've just got the big four states left. We've got California, we've got Texas, we've got Florida, and we've got New York. And those are more or less the states that will determine who wins, or who will kind of be the finalist in this situation. So the first thing that I think Texas is going to do is it's going to go to war with California, and not much is going to happen because they're pretty evenly matched. Texas might be able to take small chunks, but not significant. And because of this, Florida is also going to go to war with Texas. However, due to Florida going to war, New York is going to go to war with Florida. And so we'll say Florida might start pushing into Texas, some of these areas near Texas. Not really substantially though. We'll make small gains. And New York is going to start pushing through into these areas that were formerly controlled by Florida. Let's get this set up to how it is. It's very confusing with how these colors are working. Shoot. Okay. So this will be a big push by New York. They're fighting here. And California isn't going to do anything to New York. Not going to try to take that northern Wisconsin, part of northern Wisconsin and Michigan, because they're fighting Florida, who is fighting Texas, and California is fighting Texas. So they're kind of just going to let that go. New York is pushed into northern Virginia now against Florida. Let's see. Texas is starting to make some gains against California, very minute gains. They're fairly evenly matched, but I do think Texas has the edge, and since they're not really having to fight Florida too much, they'll be able to make a little bit, although California didn't have to fight anybody, so they're going to hold up pretty well. Maybe a little just kind of gains across the board here. Let's see what else. Let's see. We're kind of in a stalemate here. I think New York will continue to push a little bit into Florida, and so we're gonna see just a little more gains here, but not significant really. And Texas is going to lose some territory. California is going to push back basically, and to these parts of Arizona, because they want to take Phoenix back. They won't make a ton of progress, but they will make some. Might be able to take Phoenix here, it's hard to tell. What else? Sorry, we're getting close to kind of like the stalemate stage, it seems like. I think these areas would be pretty evenly distributed population-wise. I think, maybe the most population here could really go to any of them. It's hard to tell. It might go to Florida, or could go to New York. I don't know. Let's see, California is gonna invade Hawaii. There's no reason. I just am getting sick of seeing Hawaii. So they're going to be taken by California. That doesn't help them at all, really. And Florida, with like all the like water stuff that they have in their territories, so they're going to have like a lot of civilian-owned boats that can be used. They're going to make a big play. They're going to try to take some of these islands here and try to make a landing near New York, and I think they will be able to. They're going to make a little push here up into Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Nothing significant, but they will be able. I think they would be able to do that. And however, because of all that, Texas is able to start fighting Florida's Navy, and they're going to start, and Florida's going to start losing to Texas in that aspect, and Texas is going to make a landing on the Keys, right outside of Florida on their doorstep, which will be very worrying for Florida. And however, they've all kind of got footholds, but nothing too significant. Let's see. Sorry, I'm not sure where to go from here. It's difficult. They're all kind of evenly matched. I think California is going to start pushing back through Utah and nearly pushing and through Arizona and just in these kind of areas. But since Texas is just so busy. And during this time, Florida is not going to concentrate its forces on fighting Texas. They're going to go all in on trying to defeat New York here because Texas is tied up already. So they're gonna just pump all their hopes into this naval landing up in New England, and maybe they would take little chunks of that. They've made another landing in Maine, which will be big, and they're really just pumping everything they have into this. They'll take northern Maine. So now, New York is fighting kind of a war on two fronts. However, because of all the, how heavy of a commitment, they've put into this, or, Florida has put into this, they're going to start losing parts of Virginia to New York. But they're going to be able to kind of hold the Rockies pretty well. But they'll be pushed back to the Rockies. Or not the Rockies, the Blue Ridge. Parts of the Blue Ridge that they'll be able to hold on to, I think. All this eastern shore is taken. Let's see, who even controls Kentucky? I think, yeah, we'll say, I'm not actually sure who controls Kentucky. So it's kind of a failure on my part, but I'm not sure. We're gonna say that Florida invaded it, and does take some chunks of it, but not significant enough to really make much of a difference. Well, actually, we'll put this back. Okay. The fight. So Texas is starting to get worried about the fact that New York might fall, and if that happens, Florida would win, and they would have to fight off Florida and California. So they're gonna really start pumping troops into into the Keys, trying to take southern Florida. Or here, let me switch that color. Trying to take southern Florida. I'm not just, yeah. And they might make some progress, and they're gonna push lots of manpower into the front, kind of in the south. They're gonna push down into New Orleans, taking Louisiana. However, because of this, they're putting so much into fighting Florida, that California is going to start making gains overall in their front against Texas. They're going to start pushing. They've taken most of Wyoming, pushing into Colorado, pushing into Minnesota, pushing through South Dakota. And Texas will still be able to hold some of this, but they're going to struggle because they're pushing so much against Florida. And so that's going to be a big change. But Texas will be able to get something out of this. They're losing territory in the west, but they're gaining in the east. And they're pushing farther up into southern Florida. And so now kind of a lot of the countries are kind of panicking. Besides, both New York and Florida are panicking because Florida has made this big landing in New York, and Texas has made this landing in Florida. So Florida is starting to push through. They've taken Maine, they've taken parts of New Hampshire. They're meeting up with their forces that may have landed in Massachusetts. And they're kind of on the doorstep of New York now, of the state of New York. And Texas is kind of on the doorstep of, or is in Florida. And let's see. And it seems to me that California is kind of winning out of all of this, but it's hard to tell. So California is going to continue to kind of just try and wear away at Texas, taking chunks of land here, like just overall on the front. They'll struggle because Texas is still a very powerful nation, and a lot of these are a very powerful state. But overall, it'll be it's tough for Texas to pump so much into fighting Florida and be able to defend from California as well. So California will make some gains. Florida at this point has a very difficult choice to make. They got to decide whether they want to go all out to kind of destroy New York here, and because they have the opportunity, but if they do that, they're highly risking Texas to make it all the way, to make it through Florida, which would be devastating. However, they're gonna try to make it through New York before Texas can finish, and they're gonna hope that California sees Texas trying to really push a lot even more into Florida, and that California will push just everything into Texas, basically. Because they're saving their forces. So Florida is continuing to do this, and they're making gains here. They've taken most of the New England. They're on the doorstep of New York. They've cut off Long Island. They're going to try to cut off Long Island here by taking this little chunk, and they'll be able to do it. This will be very big because now that's a good population of New York gone or cut off from the rest. However, Texas, and due to this, Texas is going to make more gains in Florida, and this will be really tough for Florida to come back from because now they've lost half of their home state, and Texas is also just throwing everything in the kitchen sink at Florida. They've taken Mississippi. They're pushing farther and farther up. And, however, because of this, California is also throwing everything in the kitchen sink at Texas, and they're making gains. They've taken most of Arizona now. They're putting a little bit up into the northern parts, but not as much. They've kind of just got better things to worry about, since they're now near Texas, they're not too far away. This is all Texas here. Okay, here's the Texas border redrawn. Sorry, it's very difficult to see with how weird this thing can be sometimes. Okay, so Florida has taken all this New England territory with their landing, and they've cut off Long Island, and they're starting to actually make progress into northern New York, although this might not really be enough. This could be, because at the same time, Texas has made farther gains. They're really pushing up into Florida. They've taken three-quarters of the peninsula at this point. They're pushing into Alabama. So this is going to be a race basically to see whether Texas gets to Florida's capital before Florida gets to New York's capital. Or not capital, but just their main state, because without the main state controlling, it's going to kind of collapse after that. So Texas is pushed in heavy through here. And New York, or Florida, is going to continue to push farther up into the northern parts of New York. They're struggling to make it to the big points, though. Manhattan, or Long Island, is holding out. even though they've been cut off. So New York, yeah, oh my. At the same time, with Texas pushing this much into Florida, California is going to continue. That's not really, yeah, it kind of is, but California is going to continue pushing hard into Texas and making gains. They're pushing them out of Arizona completely now, pretty much completely. And this will be a kind of a disaster or not good for Texas. Not an outright disaster, but certainly not what Texas wants. So now Texas really only has, in most of these places, or now Texas only has New Mexico as a buffer from California before their own state starts taking invasion, or it starts to be invaded. And here at this point, there's just kind of weird, but what we're gonna say in this scenario is, and I really don't know this. This is very difficult to call, but I think that Texas is gonna throw everything at California and forget about Florida, because they've got bigger problems since California is on their doorstep now, and Florida is going to start taking back its own territory, which will be, they're going to start taking back the potential. I mean, Texas isn't just going to give it up, but they're going to start pumping a lot less manpower into it. Some of the front lines collapse here, and now New York is in a very sticky bad situation here, because Florida is basically just, they're gonna be able to push through into New York with this landing. They're just gonna be able to overpower New York, and Long Island has been cut off from New York for months at this point, so they're very hungry basically, yeah. And Florida is gonna be able to take New York. This is out of the final four, this is the first of them to fall. And so now New York is part of Florida. Let's get this colored in properly. And this will be huge. This is monumental for Florida. They've now secured all of the East Coast under their control. And Florida is also the nation who's taking out all three of the top rated states. They've taken out all of them now. And here let's just actually color this. I had to use a weird color for Florida up there, but I can use its normal color now. So we can fill in all of New England with Florida's new color, or Florida's color. And so now it's really, Texas is in a very weird situation here. They were able to take back or push back California because they gave up on fighting Florida. So they were able to make gains here. However, Florida was able to take New York, and now Florida has to recover from all their fighting in New York, but they can put all of their focus onto Texas. So Texas made a big push, probably not as much up here, but mainly in the south to push back Florida. I mean, to push California away from their state, and they were able to pull it off, although at a heavy cost. So now California is starting to get nervous because Texas is right on its border and could start pushing in. And during this, Texas also, mainly just to scare California, made a landing on these islands. and possibly also up here to at least have the capability to fight California on multiple fronts. And this is really kind of the final stages, but here, let's zoom out. But so Florida is tired from fighting everybody. They are able to take back, or from fighting New York, but they are able to take back their own state from Texas, taking these islands back as well because they do have a lot of naval power. I'm gonna go ahead and just color this in with their color. At this point, we don't have to use so many different colors because there's only a few states left. In fact, actually, that's looking kind of funky, but I'll go with it. Ah, shoot. Alright, it's not gonna work, but whatever. Alright, so the problem for Texas here, though, is they're stuck between California and Florida. And you never want to fight a war on two fronts, it never works. Although Florida kind of did. However, they won because Texas gave up on fighting in the southern front. Fighting on Florida's southern front. So, in this situation, Texas is in a bad situation, and they're basically, with the combination of both, they're really going to have to go for a Hail Mary here. And they've got two options. They could just try to push, since they're almost on the border with Florida's panhandle, they could try to push through straight to Florida, or they could go straight for California with these islands. And since they are kind of on the doorstep of both, they do have that option. And the weaker of the two here is realistically going to be California in this situation, because California, and they've been fighting. I think just here that California is the weaker of the two. They've got less population by far than Florida's empire does. So Texas is just going to go full on. They might put a little troop stationed in the east, but they're just going to go full on Blitzkrieg style. Just go straight for California to end it, because they're not going to win a long-term war here. They're going to take these islands that they captured earlier. They're going to start pushing into Washington from the north, pushing along the coast. And at the same time, they're going to take these islands that they captured here, and they're going to try to push in through into California here. And they're going to try to push into the southern parts of California. Although with this, though, they're almost completely leaving themselves, like, just almost not defending anywhere else. They're pushing everything into these offensives. So with that, New York or Florida is going to start pushing in just overall on the whole front, taking territory from Indiana, taking back Indiana, or not back, but taking the rest of Kentucky, taking Tennessee, just overall taking huge amounts of territory, taking Alabama. Florida's got a lot of boats, so they're gonna kind of also push a lot into the coast, pushing into Louisiana. Just overall making a ton of advances here. They're they're pushing into Louisiana heavily, which will be very worrying for Texas because they share a border with Louisiana. But Texas knows that their only chance of winning here is by just defeating California quickly. So they're gonna keep pushing everything into fighting California. They're gonna keep pushing in through Washington, up on the coast, and they're gonna push into Oregon. They're gonna. The big thing though is they're really pushing this naval landing here, and they're pushing this parts of Southern California as well, and they're gonna try to meet up with their forces that made the landing on in like mid California. And from this, the troops that are stationed up north for California fighting Texas, they're coming down to defend their main state, but they're facing almost no resistance from Texas up here, so they're gonna make gains in all these midwestern states and northwestern. And at the same time, Florida is just completely running through Mississippi, running into Illinois, pushing into northern Wisconsin, just really making huge gains against Texas, since Texas isn't able to defend like at all from Florida with how much they're focusing on California. Florida is going to push into the southern parts of Texas and Louisiana because of how strong their navy or naval stuff is, which will be huge. Although they are could be overextending themselves here with how short this is, but we'll see. Texas is continuing to make advances here. They're pushed all the way to northern California from Washington, and oops, I didn't mean to do that much, but their goal here now is they're going to try to cut off this southern region of California by meeting up with their mainland forces with their landed forces, and they're going to pull this off. It's going to be very difficult, but they will be able to pull it off, and that'll cut off that section of California completely. And however, during this, California, they're still bringing their men down. They're making more and more gains against Texas and other places, which is so they're still on the doorstep of Texas, and worst of all, they're risking being cut off, or not really risking being cut off too much, I guess, but sort of. Yeah, not really, I guess. But they are starting to they're really taking a lot of Texas back. And same with Florida, they're pushing into Illinois still. They've taken it at this point. Pushing all the way into Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa. All these are being taken. And here, let me do some of that, but here is an interesting, they've got an interesting choice here, Florida does, on what they want to do. They could try to cut off this section of Texan troops here by pushing into this area and surrounding them and the Texan troops in Wisconsin and Iowa, or they can go straight for southern Texas, which is going to be hard fighting because it's Texas. Everybody there is armed, and also it's desert and it's not fun fighting weather. But I think here they're gonna go for this cutoff just because they want to weaken, because they probably think at this point California might fall. So they're going to want to weaken Texas as much as possible. And so they're going to start pushing in. And they're going quite aggressive here, but they're going to make it all the way to Californian troops. And now this whole area is captured by, or is surrounded by, Florida on one side and California on the other. Let's fill this in with the color I want to show it better, but so now they've got different options. This is a huge encirclement. This is an entire state size encirclement, but they've pulled it off. So now those Texan troops have a choice to make, and it's whether they want to try to break out, whether they're going to try to break out down here in this kind of area, or whether they're going to try to break out over here in this area. And I think probably the better choice here is going on the west coast side, or the western side, because California isn't really trying to invade Texas too much here. They're focused more on defending from Texas, whereas Florida is just going all for Texas. And however, during this, Texas is still pushing everything into this invasion of California because they know they have to pull it off if they want to win, especially now with how they don't control nearly as much as they used to. They've pushed through here. This encirclement that they pulled off worked, and they were able to take all that. And California took heavy casualties from that. And they're pushing through into California. They're really making big gains, but they're losing a lot on the eastern front. So this will be they're pushing a little bit more on the coast, and now they're just not sure. I'm not entirely sure where to go from here, but we're gonna say that these Texan troops, they tried to break out from. They're gonna try to break out on this Californian side more, but they're not gonna be able to because New York was surging tons of troops up there to really make sure that they couldn't break out of the encirclement. And New York, because they're encircled, they're gonna start taking more and more. New York is just gonna basically force them to surrender, or not surrender. I don't know, but New York is gonna be able to take that section, and they've pushed all of Texas all out of there now. And while I remember, that's not what I want, but whatever, we're just gonna have to deal with it. Whatever. So New York just pulled off that, and Texas is really down to its last legs at this point. They've got they've got pretty much all of Missouri, most of Kansas, all of Oklahoma, all of Arkansas, some of Louisiana, pretty much all of New Mexico, and a good chunk of Arizona and Washington, Oregon, and California. But on the other hand, Florida has tons of territory, so they're really gonna struggle. But they're making their final ditch effort. They're throwing everything away in hopes to take California, and they're gonna make progress for sure. And their new goal here is they're going to use their forces in the north to cut kind of towards Nevada, and their forces in the south are also going to cut towards Nevada and hope to get one big encirclement that'll be able to completely force California to surrender. However, they're not defending at all at this point on their other fronts, or on the front with Florida. So Florida is just going to completely go through here, taking everything. And this will be So this could be almost it. Florida is running in through southern Texas with their naval power. They're going to start cutting down in Missouri all the way down to Oklahoma in hopes of an encirclement later on. I'm going to keep pushing, just heavily pushing all the way to northern Texas. And what else? Oh yeah, they're gonna completely, or not really. That's part of California. Never mind. But they're making these. They're doing that, and this is probably where, of the small amount of defending forces that were left, besides in Texas itself, these is probably the other states where most of them were left, in Arkansas and Louisiana, as they're kind of on the border with Florida the most, kind of like the heartland of Florida. However, Texas is, they're fighting like crazy, and they're able to make this encirclement. And this encircles the majority. I didn't mean to have those parts taken. But this encircles the majority of California's population. And so now California is going to have to hold out longer than it takes New York to beat Texas, which is going to be difficult because they're encircled, but they might be able to. And New York is screaming towards this encirclement. They're pushing up heavily in this area. They're going there. Texas is fighting hard. They're doing almost everything. This is around where Dallas is, I think, as well. So this will be difficult. However, it's ultimately Texas isn't able to defend off, and this area is encircled. So now, Texas can still kind of stand on its own feet if this encirclement does happen and they lose all the territory that's encircled, but they'll have taken heavy losses. However, California is also encircled, so it's really a waiting game of who can outlast who. And Florida is just chilling here, but however, this encirclement did happen before, like earlier. Well, this encirclement is tighter because because Florida's just overall more powerful. There's a higher power disparate. I forget the word. The difference between the power of Florida and Texas is the gap. That gap is much higher than the gap between the power of Texas and California. So it's going to be very close. I think, honestly, Texans are a little tougher, than Californians. So I think that the Californians are going to start surrendering earlier and start being pushed back in this encirclement. That there's just a lot higher population density here, so that'll make it. So they're going to start being pushed. They're really taking heavy. This is like the heartland of California, and probably that area is where the majority of California's entire empire's population is. However, during this, there's still New York is just always pressing on. They're taking, and this is where the majority of Texas fighting force would be, is in this encirclement, and they just keep getting pushed back on every side. They might try to break out, but I don't think they would be able to. They're gonna fight hard. And at this time also, New York is gonna go for another encirclement here in this area and gonna be able to pull it off. And they're gonna or I keep saying New York, I mean Florida. New York was taken by Florida a while ago. They're gonna make a landing here. And during this, California is finally gonna fall to the Texan troops, and they're gone now. Or there might be still sections that'll hold out, but for the most part, California is out of this completely. And they're gonna pretty much take rapid losses, although they can't do too much. Or they can't. Texas can't actually take that much because they've got so little. They need to commit so much to defending their mainland. But they're gonna take rapid losses here of territory, or since they've pretty much been destroyed. This area of California is gonna fall because that's where most of the troops actually are. Although during this, however, the problem with this for Texas is that's not necessarily a good thing, because New York is just ever pushing through this area in Arkansas, and the encirclement works. And this will be the majority of Texan troops defeated, tons of population lost. This is like probably the Floridans are going to take this area. And they're going to take this, with this encirclement they made, they're going to take that as well. And they're going to be pushing troops in through both sides here, going for another encirclement, as they could pull this off. And if they pull this off, that would probably mean the end of Texas. And at the same time, they're pushing in through here, and they're making good progress, because California doesn't really exist anymore, and they'll probably just go over to New York at this point, or they'll try to. I'm gonna go ahead and do this to increase the, or just make it make more sense for everybody. So I'll just show everything a little better, because we have the colors for Texas had kind of got all weird. So I'm gonna change them just to one solid color so we can have everything united. Oops. We just had to do a recolor here. I think most states at this point have probably changed color a couple times, or most of the major nations have had to have their overall color changed a couple times. But that's whatever. Alright. Okay. I think Texas took that. And Alaska's just chilling this whole time, they don't really care. And so this areas of California, they're both sides are just kind of eating them up, basically. California doesn't really exist anymore. Maybe a little bit, but for the most part they've fallen. And Texas here they're starting to get, they've stopped fighting California, so they're able to throw what they have, but it's just too little too late. It's at this point, Texas is heavily weakened, and the East Coast has just so many more people than the West Coast. And they're going to pull off this encirclement. That's going to be very bad for Texas. They're going to just keep, Florida is just going to keep going here. Let's change this brush size. They're going to keep pushing in through these old Californian territories, even though they were kind of allies. The Californians hardly exist anymore, so they're going to keep pushing. And pushing in through North Dakota. granted, the Texans will be able to pull off. You know, they will be take a lot of they can take a lot of this, but they're busy. They're weakened, and they've got a quarter of Texas is already captured. So that's going to be very tough for them to do much on. It's going to be very tough for them to really capture that much territory. And overall, this will probably where will be bits of California and bits of Texas. So probably, this will probably go to. So probably Texas will probably take these chunks. They're kind of similar to Texas. They're closer. Alright. Keep working on these. Alright. And we've got this. So now we're pretty much, you can pretty much just ignore most of this stuff. It's my software being weird. But I am OCD on this stuff, so I have to have it clean. And alright, that's clean enough. It's not perfect, but I don't have time for this. This is already way too long. It doesn't really matter anyways, for the most part. Florida is gonna keep pushing in through here farther and farther. They're just gonna keep going. Florida is just, they've got so much territory, so many populated areas, strong populations. They're gonna take that chunk of Texas. They've got all the naval advantages as well, so they may want to make some kind of landing in New Mexico, in possibility for another encirclement, although I'm not sure if that would be viable. But they will make some kind of, we'll just drive a bunch of boats there, make some kind of landing, and I think we can mostly see how this is going to end. Realistically, there's just not, Texas isn't going to fight this off. If it was just 1v1s, I think Texas would have won these state battles, but with this level of, with just how it plays out and their position between two very powerful states, I don't think it's going to be enough to, I think they're probably going to lose. They're going to keep spreading out. They're probably going to pump some troops in to here, or Florida will. They're going to pump troops in up, down through Colorado, through the Rockies and stuff, which will be tough, but they're trying to fight through northern Texas. They're trying to cut off the west coast from the east coast, and they do. Now this isn't so bad, because they can this is such a big encirclement. This is like the main area, so it's a little different, but it's definitely not good. And at the same time, we've got this branch, and Texas is going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at this, and they're going to be able to cut it off. This is where a lot of the troops are, because of the fighting here, and they're going to encircle this, but at a very high cost. And Florida is obviously not going to like this, but it'll be tough for them to take it back. They're gonna try to push back, but ultimately I think Texas would defeat this. They're gonna be able to, although because of this, because of all they did, New York was able to push in more from the west, more like they're able to push more into the west, near the west coast, into Arizona, all those areas, into California, maybe a little bit. I don't know about that, but they're just gonna keep going. They might be a little less they might be a little more cautious about going for those encirclements next time. But ultimately, they're just going to keep pressing in, and they're winning on every front now. They're not losing territory. They're going to keep going, keep pushing, go into Southern California. Just they keep going. They're going to do the same thing that Texas did, land up in Washington State, and come down from there. And at this point, there's nothing that Texas can do. We'll go ahead, fill in everything else. The Texans, and they'll fight hard, but it's not going to be enough. They're going to start coming in from the west, through up in Kansas, all just pushing straight. And now Texas is pretty much alone. They've got a quarter of their actual state. They're alone. The West Coast is they're not connected to the West Coast, and the West Coast is falling apart. Florida is continually pushing through. They've just got such a population. They're so big and powerful at this point that Texas doesn't really care about the West Coast. They're pushing. They might make some kind of push from Wyoming to Oregon and cut. Now, Texas is split into 3 parts. They'll take Hawaii because they feel like it. They wouldn't actually do this, but I feel like it. And so I can say 3 parts. They're going to keep pushing. They're going to push in northern Texas, and this will be hard, but they are able to do it. They're continually just pushing through. They'll make they might do something like that. Make another encirclement there. Do the same thing that Texas did to California, and gun for that, although it's a little different here, but like the same results. They're splitting them into more and more pieces, and some of these encirclements are so big that they don't really count as encirclements, but they sort of do. But they'll keep pushing. They'll push through Montana. Montana's not really gonna. At this point, Montana is the least of the worries. So they'll take, most of Montana. They might leave a little bit because they're bored, but they'll take this encirclement in Arizona. They'll just keep going. They'll split them into more pieces. Just keep going like that. They're kind of trying to wear down Texas, because the homeland of Texas, is still going to be a pain. But ultimately, they're just going to keep pushing through Nevada. They're taking Vegas and everything. They're just going there. They keep running through. Alaska's still holding out, because that's just about an impossible task to capture Alaska from the people who live there and the terrain. They're going to keep going. They're taking the rest of Montana or Idaho or whatever. No problem there. And finally, they're coming to the last holdouts. They're coming into California, and they're coming in through California, and they're going to take it. And they're just going to grind away at Texas here. Texas fights hard, but they're not a match for the rest of the U.S. combined, in no way. And ultimately, we knew this like 20 minutes ago, but they're just not. They're gonna keep going. They're gonna take the rest of Texas here. And yep, they've taken all of the continental U.S. They'll invade Alaska if they feel like it. Alaska will fight hard. This would be tough to take for sure, but probably land on these islands and stuff. So now it's just the continental U.S. versus Alaska. They'll keep pushing up into there. we'll keep going. They'd probably just stop here because you don't want to fight up there. That would just be a waste. But ultimately, we'll give it to them. We'll say they go everywhere. We'll say they take all of Alaska. Alright, and this is the final map. I do not know everything. Feel free to correct me on anything you want. I am not an expert in this whatsoever. I'm just doing this for fun. And that's all. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe. Alright, goodbye.